I spend a lot of time in China, and I know leaders, and I see both perspectives, and I want to try to be as accurate as I possibly can in painting those perspectives. Okay, there is a hierarchy, and in most large companies in the United States, you would not have a vote and an election as to who's operating it, and so it's a top-down kind of management in which the government is working in the coordination of its private sector and its public sector.
Extremely involved.
Right, exactly. And they would say, it seems so crazy not to be. I mean, so a leader of China described it as follows, okay? He said, and this will help you understand the Chinese mentality. And because you know Iran and you know the United States, if one needs to suspend biases in order to try to hear the other's perspective. And so what a leader in China described to me, he said, the essence of the difference between the United States and China is what is the unit that matters. In the United States, it is the individual. It is individualism, and it is the individual. And everything is bottom up. You know, it's the entrepreneur, you elect your government from bottom up, and so on. So it's a bottom up type of process. Companies are put together by people who all want to make money together. They find it and they come together and they make it bottom up, but it's bottom up. If you want to build a highway, okay, individual property rights will matter a lot more in the United States. So an individual can almost stand in the way of that highway being. If you have a mission to get something done, individuals can stand in the way or facilitate it. So that's bottom up. And he said in China, the unit is the family. And if you understand Confucianism is for China what Judeo-Christian roots is for the United States. And that starts with the family, and it says, if you know how to run your family well, and there are rules for running your family well, according to Confucius, and then you know how to interact with your family, interacting with the greater society, you have order. But it's very paternal. Paternal means, okay, your responsibility, it's top down. So when they're running the government, it would be very similar to maybe running a big company here, that they would say, okay, well, there's top down.
Which produces better results?
I'm not going to get, that we can ask.
But I understand the philosophy where you're going with this.
So it's top down.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated question, right? The important thing, I'll give you what my thoughts are on that. In their experience, when I first started going there, which was in 1984, since 1984, they have increased their incomes by an average of 26 times. They've gone from 2% of GDP to 22% of GDP. They had a poverty rate, which was 88%. It's now gone to less than 1%. They have lengthened the life expectancy by 10 years. I'm not saying which has gone better or not, but I'm saying they believe, and when you look at it, that process is a logical process and it works well. And so that is the one that they're operating by. I grew up in America, which was a land of opportunity for me. And this goes back to what I'm saying in terms of it's got to be a land of opportunity. But I grew up and all I had were two parents who loved me, and I went to a public school, and I believe in this opportunity and that element of those types of freedoms to create that opportunity. Right now in the United States, we have a problem in the public education system in terms of the quality. Certain areas which can't receive basic funding for basic things, the most basic things, because money doesn't get to them. They would say, well, that would be intolerable. How do we deal with it? We have our own problems. So that each has elements of pros and cons. They could say, listen, having my companies work with my government, let's say on research. If I was to take AI research, or if we take Huawei or companies like that, and you would say, well, in earlier years.
Before we continue, help us by smashing that YouTube like button and subscribe now to this channel. This shows the algorithm that you value the information, and it helps us spread this message. Sharing is caring. Please like and subscribe now. Thank you. And now let's continue.
There was funding for original research. If it's just the exact profit motive before you make it, it may not be that the best results are necessarily always dealt with, particularly the profit motive. So they might say, listen, we'll put money into development. Now we would say in I think a maybe too black and white way, that putting money into the development by the government making some of those moves would not be our way of doing it from profit down. And so if you look at, let's say, what DARPA's come up with in terms of where the internet came from and where GPS came from. So there are issues. My main point is, let's step back from that. The question you're asking me is irrelevant. Which would I like? It doesn't matter. I mean, because of the pros and cons. Because the issue really is, will they have the right to do it their way?
There is no question about the right.
Let me just finish. Will they have the right to do it that way? Or no, there is a question around the right. Because will they do it that way, and will we do it our way? And then you have the real conflict, okay? Because the real conflict, when you get down to the nitty-gritty of that conflict, is they say, the team I'm going to put on is going to be a government company partnership type of thing, okay? And we will choose not to have as much of a government partnership. And then we argue about what the rules of the game are, and that's where the hardball starts to come in, right? When there's a question of an intersection, what are the rules of the game? The United States and China would disagree. Well, that's where the rubs come. In other words, if Huawei is a company which has a tremendous lead in 5G technology, and what an American perspective in the rules would be that China pumping money into Huawei is not the way the rules should be, okay? China would say, well, that's for you to say. Each can operate by its rules within its domain.
Sure.
However, it doesn't work that way. Okay, because of how intertwined they are, okay, because of how intertwined one technology is for another. If I was to recount what goes into our technologies or their technologies, and the world that we've gone through has been intertwined. The globalization has meant that companies get this piece from the other and that piece from the other, and there are trade routes. And now we're having to go through a division of those, because it would be easy to say when you're in my domain. But the world doesn't work like the domain is cut and isolated and you're just within it, because the products are not just within it. If you take an Apple phone, if you take Apple devices, if you take a lot of things that we're using or vice versa, they are intertwined. And that is where the rub is. It's a competition. And with that competition, whatever it is, they will have our bottom up, they'll have their top down, they'll be control and we'll be this, and so on. And that's how it'll work. And so let's look at that both objectively and then just also understand what they're doing and what their perspective is. Because if you don't understand their perspective and you just paint it as, a good evil thing, all we're really doing, I think, is saying there are two teams that are coming on the field, and there are two different approaches to those, okay? And now let's look at each one. I would say the biggest issue in the United States is, how do we be as great as we can be? And that's where my greater worry is, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is, if we are as strong and capable as we can be, and as great as we can be, we will be good for ourselves and we will be good for the world and best in the event of any conflict.
I agree with that.
Okay? And that my worry is more about that, okay, than anything else.